and Colombia. So, Herc, 2 games, no wins. What did we get out of this January camp and the ensuing friendlies?
I guess with clarity that there should be no more January camp going forward.
No more at all? So you got 0 out of this. Nothing productive happened.
So the productive part would be that I realize you should phase out January camp. This is the definition of a juego molero. We criticize when the Mexican national team does this on U.S. soil, how they sell tickets for a glorified friendly with their C and D product. Well, this is essentially that. Jalen Neal ended up playing these 2 games. Jalen Neal's not even played for the LA Galaxy, the 19-year-old. If you want to phase it out and just make it a U23 camp, I am completely fine with that. January camp used to fulfill a need. It had a purpose in U.S. soccer. They were for the players that you had that were essentially maybe your B players, some of your A players, and for them to get them going and get those legs fresh, get them introduced into this new program, if you will. But if essentially this is the C/D team, if you will, and the majority of your players are in Europe, what are you really getting out of this? You're promoting a product at half gas. You're promoting players that not even started their preseason yet, or actually a week into their preseasons, if you will. So I don't know what you get out of it except selling a gate, except selling sponsorships. I don't know how these players can actually show you something when they're all trying to get into shape. So it's fulfilled its need. If you want to say identify players for the future, make it a U23 camp. I have no issue with that.
Okay.
But don't for 1 second just be like, hey, people in LA don't like these games. I think they're sophisticated and smart enough to know what they're going to get, and they don't go to these games.
Right. So your point is that the games shouldn't happen. You're not necessarily about abolishing January camp entirely, right? Because last week on the show, we did this whole segment that the gems of January camp, all the finds over the years, and a lot of them, to your point, were from many, many moons ago, right? We were talking about the early 2000s, but there were some good recent ones. Matt Turner's one, Jesus Ferreira's one, Brendan Aronson is a recent January camp guy. So, like, for those guys, there is some benefit. You do want to see the camp continue. You just think the games aren't worth anything.
Those guys were going to get called up regardless. What I want to see is the next generation or future generations. That's why I have no problem with it being a U23 camp. But if you're going to show me a 29-year-old Julian Gressel, with all due respect to Julian Gressel, he's a good footballer, or a center back pairing in Walker Zimmerman and Aaron Long, I don't need to see that. I don't know what you get out of that. Listen, Brandon Vasquez, Matt Turner, there's always these gems that you can integrate but potentially have a place in the first team. But I think it does you very little to see a combination of C and D players together, and trot them out in a preseason glorified exhibition and say, show me what you got. It's almost unfair to those players.
The one area where I think we are kind of missing the point here, if we say there's 0 benefit to January camp and maybe even these games, I would even put some more value on these games in this sense, is the recruiting. We talk a lot about the dual nationals and the guys who have choices of where to play. Remember the game against Serbia? What was it? 7 of the 11 were dual nationals, all still with the opportunity to play for another country. I think these January camp games and the camps themselves and the games, which are non-committal, so it's a non-pressurized situation, it gives guys who still want to keep that door open to another choice the opportunity to come in, put on the colors, experience a game. Now, that opportunity would mean more if the guy you were playing for wasn't Anthony Hudson, if it was actually the guy who was going to be in charge in the future. But I think it does. I think if we're going to give U.S. Soccer credit for recruiting, we have to look at where, I mean, Jesus Ferreira is a perfect example of that. When they called him in, he's eligible for Colombia, the United States. He ends up getting called into camp. Soon enough, he's cap-tied, and he became a big part of the team, not just through qualifying, but obviously, at least for a little bit in the knockout rounds of the World Cup. There's something significant there.
There's something significant for January camp, the games, or to bringing these players in?
To bringing them in, to getting games.
Oh.
I think games is a part of that. I think it's harder to pull guys away from clubs.
I just
your
find
point
it
about pulling guys away from Europe.
I find it
if you don't have
disingenuous on
games.
your part how you criticize and you kill Mexican soccer for the juego moleros, but you're okay with this January camp. You don't bring up it's It's a good way for them to identify players. It's good for the recruitment of the dual nationals.
Yeah, but they never call up anybody new or interesting. They call up the same old guys.
Time out. This is when you
that's
see
the point.
No, that's a lie. This is when you see the David Ochoas, the Efrain Alvarez. This is when you see the Julian
Oh,
Araujo's.
come on.
That is disingenuous on your part. Now, I take issue with that. Why is it okay for one and not the other? This is
I see a value to this. I see a value to this.
Why do you not see value?
I don't care if you don't want to play the games, that's fine, because the competition in these games is a joke. It's just like it's the US B or C team. It's Serbia's B or C team. It's Colombia's B or C team.
Seb. It's not even. So when the majority of your base is now in Europe, who are you really identifying? Who are you really looking at here? It's not the same thing as what Matt Turner. I'm telling you, these moments are being phased out.
So you don't think that Brandon Vasquez scoring a goal for the United States, wearing that shirt, if Mexico were to ever come calling, that could weigh on him? You don't think there's a value to that in that tug of war and that recruiting battle for a player?
That Alejandro Zendejas. I just want to know. That's exactly what you want. You want this.
It's a huge benefit, yes.
I just want to know.
And it's a huge part of what the United States needs to do.
So the fans should continue to go out and trout their hard spending or spend their hard-earned
money. Sure, if you want to see the future of the program.
Sure. Team. That's
if you believe it's the future of the program, yes.
Okay, you believe this is the future of the program.
So you don't think people should go to January camp?
No, I'm just curious. Walker Zimmerman, Aaron Long, the future of the program. That's what we're getting at here.
Those are two guys.
No,
out of
Julian
the 24
Gressel,
that
the future of the program. That's what we're getting at here.
That were called up.
Paul Arriola, the future of the program. That's what we're getting at here.
Brandon Vasquez could be your starting 9. Alejandro Zendejas.
Seb, if you want to make it a U23 camp, okay, I've got zero issue. I take issue with C and D players in preseason and you selling out like a full team. I take issue with that. Now, if fans want to go and spend their money on that, no problem. But don't sit here and criticize the Juego Moleros on the Mexican side and not criticize these.
Okay, Hercules Gomez has spoken.
Well, thank you very much for watching ESPN on YouTube. For more sports highlights and analysis, be sure to download the ESPN app. And for live streaming, premium content, and let's not forget as well, ESPN FC 7 days a week. Subscribe to ESPN+.